Welcome back, everyone. This is Mr. Brain, your friendly neighborhood gaming dad, here with another hero breakdown video. And I'm actually excited to do ranged hero breakdowns despite being an infantry main, because I think this one in particular is going to change things. Um, Maybe not for the better, but we'll definitely see some changes to how rallies are held with this commander. So we're going to break it down in our usual fashion. We will first go over their skills, where you're going to see them in combat, a good talent tree build for them, and in the end, we'll talk about what heroes you can expect to pair with this commander. So let's get into the skills of Bard. First things first, deals damage to up to 3 enemy targets in a circular area for a total of for 13,000. So, two things note here. One, 13,000 is a lot of damage. Even for ranged commanders, 13,000 packs a heavy punch, even on a single target. Yes, it's reduced by 15% for every additional target, so if you're hitting 3 targets, it's reduced by 30%. However, it's also in a circular area. It's the only other commander besides Lewis that affects enemies in a circular area like this, or damages enemies in a circular area like this. So already we've got an actually buffed version of Lewis. And it actually covers one of Lewis's weaknesses. If this skill kills an enemy squad, has a 50% chance to immediately recover 60 rage. One of the things that you see a lot with Lewis on the field, especially in rallies, is you will send as many single target troops at Lewis as you can in order to get this 15% reduction on as many targets as possible, essentially weakening Lewis's skill damage down to 40% of its base. Because if you get this to stack 4 times, you're reducing the skill damage by 60%. That is huge. You can't do that with Bard. If he kills a single target march, he gets a 50% chance to immediately recover 60 rage. Yes, you can weaken his skill damage by 30%, but you're going to make his skills activate probably a second faster on average, meaning he's just going to hit you hard and faster. 2. Increases range squad attack by 30%. Nice, pretty solid buff there. If an enemy is inflicted with silence, increases basic attack damage dealt to them by 21%. Now, we've got a couple of commanders now that can inflict silence, and only one of them can do so consistently. So this 21% won't be useful in a lot of places, but it's a nice bonus, especially when you're already increasing your range squad attack by 30%. So don't throw it to the wayside, but it's not a bad one. Skill number 3. During sieges, this includes any instance where Bard is hitting a garrison squad, whether it be in a tower, a shelter, a checkpoint, whatever the case may be, rally or not. Increases range squad defense and HP by 25%. This is a nice 50% buff on where we're going to end up using him the most. So that's a 50% buff to stats plus the 30% range squad attack. We're sitting on 80% in buffs on where we're going to see him used. So, and you've heard me talk about this before with some of the later heroes compared to earlier heroes. The stat buffs need to be rounded out, because early game commanders, especially the early game legendary commanders, can't keep up with these stat buffs. They just can't. So while I do like that we have another slightly defensive ranged commander on sieges, it's already not looking good for the balance of the game. And here we're about to completely destroy that balance. Skill number 4. During rallies, increases skill damage dealt to garrison squads by 54%. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. Even on his own skill, hitting a single target at 54% buff is over 7,500 damage factor on top of the 13,000 he's already dealing. That's not even counting any other buffs that you get from armaments, talents, equipment, anything else. That is ridiculous. If he's paired with another single target heavy hitter or someone that can get his rage generation up, it's going to be destructive on a completely different level. Now, they tried to round this out by saying, but all damage taken from garrison squads is increased by 12.5%. The problem with that is, can you name good garrison commanders that are simply designed to deal damage? There's not many good ones. Lewis has been used on garrison to great effect in order to keep from being swarmed and to hit those weaker targets around you. Jacob has been used on garrisons from time to time, but there's not a lot of heavy hitting garrisons. So to increase damage taken from garrison squads when they aren't going to have a chance to hit you near as hard as you hit them, just no. If they switch this to, instead of garrison squads, to all sources, then I think that would make this far more fair. Because then you could try and swarm him down or counter rally him for additional damage. But he's not taking additional damage from counter rallies or swarms. He's just taking that additional damage from the garrison squad. And I don't think that's enough to counteract the insane amount of skill damage Bard's going to be putting out. And as if there isn't enough insult to injury, the Awaken skill increases the rage recovery to 65, increases the damage factor to 14,300, meaning that 54% buff. It's just, it's too much. And on top of that, if you do still try to go with the cheese route, he's going to increase his own attack power by 30% for 3 seconds. This pretty much guarantees you can't cheese him, because you'll not only be making his skills faster, you will be giving him more attack power to hit you with. And if he's centered as the leader, then the assistant is going to get that increased attack power on their skill damage to make you pay for cheesing him in the first place. His skills are completely busted. I personally think that he's going to need a nerf before he's released, or we're going to have a lot of problems. But we will see how things go. That being said, he is a rally commander. Whether it be leading the rally for a slightly more defensive version, because he does have the defense tree you can take advantage of, but he also has ranged and siege if you wanted to go a higher damage route. He can also be a very solid assistant to some commanders, making use of that AoE damage to great effect against garrison squads or against an AoE field fight around a tower. But he's going to be completely locked to rallies. Half of his skill set requires him to be in combat with a tower, and a tower, a checkpoint, a shelter, and 99% of the time you're going to do that in a rally. That being said, talent builds. Because of the defense tree, you can go for a slightly defensive, more sustainable rally, because the defense tree does give you access to some really nice buffs, namely in ways to reduce damage taken overall, whether it be with balance strategy or damage control, as well as increasing your defense, increasing rage generated when attacked, as well as reducing skill damage, which can really hurt a ranged squad if they aren't able to hit the target that's hurting them. However, I would lean more into the ranged talent tree and the siege talent tree. If we look in the range talent tree, we have solid buffs in increasing your own attack power for a couple of seconds when using basic attacks, skill damage buffs, rage, and damage buffs. All in all, most of the range tree is highly useful for instances like that. And then you've got the siege tree, which can increase your counter damage, increase squad damage overall to garrison squads, as well as increasing your stats. All in all, just I would lean more into the siege and ranged talent trees in order to get the most out of Bard's insane damage. Now, the thing I see two really good pairs for Bard when I look at him. One, Bard Lewis. The reason I say Bard Lewis is because, well, Bard is that counter cheese mechanic to make sure that those single target marches aren't able to get close to your team without running the risk of buffing Bard in the end. If they do, then Lewis will follow up with his AoE damage at a buffed rate to ensure that one, everything around you is dead, and two, it hits the garrison squad you're attacking much harder. Plus, on top of that, you have Lewis's insane rage generation from his fourth skill using basic attacks. I see Bard Lewis being one of the first 5-second skill cycles if you play it right, and that's if he's being cheesed. Otherwise, you're still looking at a 6-second skill cycle with a solid amount of damage. The other pair that I see is actually Julia leading Bard. The reason I say this is making use of that silence damage. If you want that more sustainable damage output, making use of Bard's skill damage through the skills talent tree, really pumping those numbers as much as you can, both in skill damage and in basic attack damage, plus the silence from Julia as a whole is really nice to have. I expect to see a lot of rallies running Julia Bard as soon as Bard comes out. Now, we won't see it in next week's Island Raid since Bard won't be out yet, but I do imagine that the next Archipelago Raid, once everything is said and done, you're going to see Julia Bards hitting the field fully awakened and dealing a lot of damage. And with that, that's all I really have to say. I personally hope he gets nerfed a little bit. And the main nerf that I'm hoping to see is to see this all damage taken be extended to all squads, not just garrison. I think that will round things out a little bit more, will make things a little bit more balanced, and will increase the pace of play with Archipelago and Island Raid fights, because those rallies will be shorter and a lot harder hitting, instead of the longer, more drawn out fights that we expect to see in heavy fighting regions in Archipelago. But with that, that's my hero breakdown of Bard. This is Mr. Brain, your friendly neighborhood gaming dad, signing off.